Hello and welcome to Glofcast 5. I'm sorry for the delay. I promise you that I'm alive. It's been a very busy past couple of weeks and months, rather. So I know I haven't posted here for like a month and a half. One where I really haven't had too much time on the weekends to really develop this thing. So I'm going out of town a lot, have a lot of moving around and stuff like that. I was working at a moving company that's no longer in fruition, and I did end up moving in with my girlfriend and being, to be honest, kind of slightly anxious about just the state of the future and my life. So you can think about that as almost the millennial condition or whatever. So I apologize for all of that. So it's a mix of being tired, busy, and somehow in a weird state of despair about my current situation. So I kind of compare myself to these kind of my peers that I graduated with last year, and a little bit envious almost in a way, which is that'll kill you. That'll at least kill your spirit. So yeah, my current situation, current position, current mindset. So despair is a trap, and in a later podcast I can really go into that. But today is a more comedic-ish episode. Comedic-ish. It'll start off comedic and then it'll kind of go into something a little darker than that. So compare that to last Glofcast's cultural analysis bent. So I promise that I do have a lot of good shit lined up for the future. I've been the next week's episode is like halfway written. The script is good. Maybe like fine-tuned or whatever, but I do have a lot of good shit lined up, both in terms of, I would say, comedy and other. So strange analyses, maybe strange associations. I don't know. Just kind of, I'm just doing whatever until I can hone in on this fucking thing. But I do promise I will get back on the weekly programming. So firstly, I wanted to do a merch type thing a few weeks ago, or I guess a month and a half ago, for Father's Day. And it shows you how long ago I wrote this fucking episode, but sadly time didn't allow, so here it is. I may still make it available. Anyway, this was going to be a Father's Day gift for your dad or single mom, since as they like the world to know, they are both mommy and daddy, even though they aren't. They just like attention. The gift really wouldn't make sense to give to your mom, but a father, grandfather, stepdad, or father figure would all make sense. So go to Google and type in world's greatest dad mug. Now go to images. Now, in that style, the mug would be very, very similar to that, except it would say world's biggest dad dick, because dad dicks are huge. So do you remember that one time where you walked in on your dad in the shower or in the bedroom and you were 8 or 9 and you just saw, his hanging 6 inches swinging about? So you know what I'm talking about. It wasn't sexual or a weird pedo Dan Harmon type thing, but it was completely accidental, and you accidentally saw your dad's big swinging dad dick, and as a result you gained a new amount of respect for him. If this never happened to you, I'm sorry about the shitty relationship you have with your father. So just a bit of parenting advice from somebody who isn't a parent. If you're a dude, accidentally flash your kids when they're 8 or 9. Accidentally, mind you. It's not sexual. Don't premeditate it, just let it happen. Because when the world is still a humongous when you're 8 or 9, and the memory is still pretty fully developed. So a new level of respect will be there, and as a result, a coffee mug saying world's biggest dad dick will be indefinitely more meaningful to your dad, as opposed to something generic as hell like world's greatest dad, or the oh-so-ironic world's okayest dad. So flash your kids and beat your kids. And also, do not take parenting advice from a very shitty podcast. So there's that. And also unrelated, but I'm sure you remember the whole Vine thing and Getter's Soda thing back around like 2014, 2015, like 3-4 years ago. If you don't remember Vine, bless your heart, you small child. You probably also missed the teenagers drop-kicking cops and robbing banks in unison in order to do it for the Vine. That one was in particular that attempted to bomb a bunch of pizza places in their hometown in a Unabomber-style fashion to do it for the Vine. But it failed, and thankfully nobody was killed. Anyways, Getter is a DJ, and his friend he and his friend Nick Coletti, the dude who looks like a teenage fetal alcohol Bogdanov brother, or just the growing version of the curly-haired kid from Stranger Things, they had a little inside joke which became an internet meme. Where they would just yell, "Suh, dude," at each other. And it was meaningless and just a funny meme that Getter made into a song eventually. But luckily for all of you, I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing back the "Suh, dudes" thing. It's coming back. Get ready. Get fucking ready. Observe. I hope you enjoyed that blast from the past. Okay, so that right there kind of marks the end of kind of the comedy in this episode. In my opinion, this kind of script, it's going to take a little bit of I guess, more somber turn, which I guess is almost a reflection of, I don't know, myself or something. But basically, anyway, this week's main bit is reminiscent of the 1998 movie The Truman Show. If you haven't watched that movie, I really recommend it because it's a bit of a mindfuck, and you'll be looking suspiciously at everyone you know and everything you know for a few days. You might be checking the walls for cameras or looking in the window and making sure the birds don't have cameras and are watching you. The premise is this is a TV show where the main character is unaware that he is in said TV show. So he lives in a giant TV set on some island in Florida called Sea Haven Island, and everybody in his life, from his wife to his best friend to the mailman, is an actor. So the director of this project is a man called Christof, which is an obvious allusion to the fact that the director is playing God. Spoiler alert, Truman does become self-aware, or rather aware of the fact that his reality is a lie, and does escape the set at the end of the show. So this week's podcast is going to be about a sequel to The Truman Show called The Christof Show. So it's going to be, obviously, a movie. The movie The Christof Show appears about 20 years after Truman Burbank left the set of The Truman Show. And essentially, Christof beginning to show early signs of dementia in his funeral home or old folks home. I don't know what the difference is. He basically keeps a picture of Truman in his wallet, and he's kind of carried around a lot of guilt with him since the end of The Truman Show. It's kind of been a thing where he sees kind of the existential pain he's inflicted on Truman. So in his mind, he created kind of almost a false memory. So he keeps a picture of Truman in his wallet. This is the closest thing he's ever really had to a son, and sometimes to alleviate Christof's guilt due to Truman's myriad of mental issues after leaving the show, Christof takes it on himself to believe that Truman is, in fact, his actual son. And Christof was a great dad that provided everything his son would ever need. A great provider, a great father. It's a pragmatic false memory that helps Christof deal with existential guilt. After leaving the show, Truman developed a variety of mental problems that even his unrelenting optimism, that was kind of a characteristic that his character was known for in the original movie, it couldn't shield him even from this. So it just kind of goes on to demonstrate kind of how fucked up the entire thing actually was. So occasionally he will kind of break into the occasional psychotic episodes which all of these stem from the very real delusion, the Truman Show delusion. And in essence, Truman is unable to tell if his new real reality is actually real or if his previous fake reality was actually fake. So you think of it as a type of Stockholm Syndrome for Sea Haven Island. And this causes Truman to develop moderate alcoholism as a type of coping mechanism, which inevitably leads to his and Sylvia's divorce. So if you don't understand some references made here, watch the original Truman Show, seriously, because Sylvia, essentially, she is a kind of a B actor in the original movie that was not intended for Truman to ever actually meet, just kind of a passerby, and they ended up falling in love, and yeah, so they got married and hooked up after the Truman escaped the show. So Truman, after the show, after he left the Truman Show, Truman did not keep a television in his house, nor did he want his new job to be anything associated to television. He knew the console firsthand and its capacity to lie to all of those enamored with it, voluntarily or otherwise. And he decides to sell insurance just as he did on the television show, yet unfortunately he is not nearly as successful with it in reality than he was on that show, despite still having a degree of fame associated with the show. If anything, that kind of makes the entire ordeal a little bit more challenging for him. So his boss at the insurance company essentially tells him that he is more suited for television as opposed to selling insurance, except he does not word it nearly that nicely. So after a while, it shows kind of a few scenes of Truman attempting to sell it comedically, and he eventually gets fed up and Truman just walks out. And just to clarify, the alcoholism and divorce that Truman got, it took place a little bit after Truman lost his job. Now, he's been kind of dealing with these mental issues kind of ever since he left the Truman Show. Think of it almost in terms of like some sort of PTSD in a way, which I don't know if that'd necessarily be the best comparison for that, but he was dealing with it pretty decently, only to have it kind of unhinge after a while. And I guess that really, I don't know. There's a few, I guess, loopholes in here that we need to sort out a little bit. Like, kind of how did he survive 20 years if he was a shitty salesman? So, some stuff to think about. So, after a montage of drinking and attempting to deal with the pain of his life and going on the why me, woe is me tirade, Truman introspects and attributes every problem he's ever had, from losing his father in the show to being forced into a life of metaphysical mockery, to the Truman Show, and specifically the director of the Truman Show, Christof. And he does some research on Christof, trying to find out what exactly it is that Christof is up to nowadays. And he does this kind of obsessively and becomes convinced that the only way to get some sort of existential relief before he inevitably attempts to commit suicide is to find Christof and enact some sort of revenge on him as a sort of catharsis. So in this process, he finds out that the elderly home where Christof lives, as well as this particular elderly home is hiring. So Truman actually does end up getting a job and applies using a fake resume, and somehow ends up getting hired, and ends up secretly, and sometimes not so secretly, getting drunk on the job, determined to fuck with Christof in the way that Christof fucked with Truman. This is very antithetical to the good-natured, wacky Truman of the Truman Show, but it's a manifestation of the pain Truman feels as a result of this. So, some stuff happens in the middle. I'm still trying to kind of hash all of that out, but it's mainly completed. Christof, in the midst of his state of Alzheimer's, can't put a finger on where he knows his male nurse, Truman, from. So Truman, in a state of drunken stupor due to his alcoholism, he pulls various rather mean-spirited pranks on Christof while recording it, each one slightly more severe than the last. And he records it other than no other reason to be facetious, and he facetiously names this phenomenon the Christof Show. And Truman figures this as an appropriate payback for the sort of existential pain Christof and the Truman Show has inflicted on Truman. Though Truman does not yet view this as playing God, at least not yet, much in the same way that Christof did. So the pranks escalate in severity, much in a way done as to make Christof appear, over time, a little bit more sympathetic, a little bit more kind of a sympathetic character. And at the climax of the Christof Show's increasing mental and sometimes physical severity and abuse, Truman drunkenly steals Christof's wallet, and for some reason only to find Truman's picture in there, and there's some note or something conveying the fact that Christof views him as a son, more or less. And Truman and Christof have a mutual moment of clarity together through the alcoholism and the dementia. So Truman, realizing that he is no better than Christof for fucking with a human in a state of mental vulnerability, it also dawned on him that he and Christof may have more in common than either of them really originally thought, much in a father-son paradigm, almost. So Christof momentarily catches a glimpse of the existential gaslighting, more or less, that he inflicted upon Truman back when the Truman Show was a thing. And he feels the guilt that he was somehow trying to suppress, rush back into just kind of an overwhelming barrage of stuff. And so it was essentially two guilty parties and having almost a sort of a stare down, in a way. It's like almost, almost Western in a way, but not quite. So, very brief, but Truman leaves hastily in just kind of a fit of how the hell could I do this to an elderly man? And then Christof just kind of sits there weeping gently and quietly as he watches Truman walk away. And so Truman leaves and he does not return to this elderly home. And he realizes he has a problem and begins to attend AA at a local church, only to get recognized by the fellow members. And after watching a video of the meeting on a television, which is a segment from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where Mr. Rogers talks with a disabled boy about his condition, and ends up singing, "It's You I Like," Truman has an epiphany, realizing that the medium for television isn't evil in and of itself, but the messages conveyed can be. So he heeds his earlier boss's advice and proceeds to return to television, this time willingly and aware of it, but with a different approach. He becomes a televangelist. Now, prior to this, Truman was not a religious person. Even during the Truman Show, and even when becoming a televangelist, he was not religious. But he simply had motivations for making television greater than what it was and what it is. So if he could inspire something for people to believe in, something to kind of give them hope, that's kind of what his goal would have been. And you can kind of think of this almost as a parallel to the original Truman Show, where kind of his unrelenting optimism, people would leave that on for all hours of the day. It offered them kind of a degree of comfort. And here it really wasn't, maybe the concept itself wasn't as revolutionary as it was, but it was him kind of doing it, albeit in a kind of a different way. And as his televangelism show goes on, he gradually becomes more religious, turning to Christianity. And his show has numbers surpassing his previous show's numbers to become both the world's most successful televangelist and television show. And he makes it a point every show to convey that while many view him as being the optimistic star of the original Truman Show, he has his demons to wrestle with, and only to come to faith because of his dad. And he doesn't really expand on that. He just says his dad. So it could be his Truman Show dad, it could be Christof. That's kind of a little bit up to interpretation. And yeah, but it's kind of inferred that he does in fact mean Christof. So Christof does in fact tune in every night, and eventually over time he does feel the guilt does subside, and he does applaud his quote-unquote son's new show. And then eventually it kind of shows him passing away peacefully of the body, mind, and soul in his sleep. The fake memory of being a good traditional father and the true memory of being the director of the Truman Show blend together in Christof's final thoughts before passing on. And the credits roll. So I know that wasn't exactly comedic, I know, but thank you very much for listening. So Glofcast, I promise you, is coming back. I know today's episode is a little bit shorter than a lot of the previous ones have been, but they will get longer. I'm going to kind of expand on it. I may try like once a month, hour long, just something or other. I can't say it'll be planned. It'll be kind of maybe impromptu, but I think it'll be kind of good and kind of help me out as a content creator, podcast creator, to kind of just have a methodology for being able to kind of improvise more on the spot. But I do promise I do want to make this a weekly thing. So mark my fucking words. So I do have the next several episodes planned out. I'm kind of liking the cultural analysis side of things, so I may kind of lean more in that direction. Maybe, let's see, maybe splitting this off into like two sides. Maybe Glofcast can be something else, and then stuff with Glof can be the more serious stuff. So we'll cross that fucking bridge when it comes to it. I've also flirted with having a tax podcast, since I have a master's in accounting and a CPA and all that shit. So I figured I may as well capitalize on that. So I may try to make these longer, who knows. Anyways, thank you very much for listening to Glofcast 6, The Christof Show. Take care.